As people grow older and wish for their children to show filial piety. 1. Do not engage in moral kidnapping of your children. Some parents, while striving to create a better life for their children, simultaneously attempt to morally manipulate them. They demand that children obey them unconditionally, assuming that their children are mere extensions of themselves and should comply with their arrangements. When children start to show signs of independence, attempting to break free from parental control, some parents begin to morally coerce them, insisting that children must make sacrifices and act according to their desires. Whenever children go against their wishes, these parents lament about how much effort they have invested and how much hardship they have endured, blaming their children for ingratitude. In reality, such parents magnify their own role as parents while obscuring the concept of children as independent individuals with the right to make their own decisions. Parents have indeed invested significant energy, time, money, and love, but it is problematic to expect children to be eternally grateful and obedient without complaint. To establish authority and a harmonious parent-child relationship, avoid suppressing children with your parental status or attempting to dominate their lives. As parents, you should learn to guide gently and discuss issues with your children openly, rather than solely giving directives from a position of superiority and not allowing them to speak up or offer honest critiques. 2. Do not frequently undermine and question your children. Everyone has inherent worth, and the key lies in whether a person's talents and qualities can be discovered and encouraged. Many traditional Chinese parents criticize their children with statements like, "You can't do this," or "You're not good at that," as if children are inherently weak and incapable. They do not expect their children to be independent. However, once these parents enter society, they criticize their children for not handling societal pressures well and complain that they are not resilient or ambitious enough. In truth, many aspects of a child's character and understanding are shaped by their parents' guidance and education. When parents continually undermine and mock their children, it accumulates over time, leading children to feel a deep sense of powerlessness and doubt their abilities, even growing older without knowing what they excel at or enjoy. This happens because all opportunities for growth and development were interrupted by their parents. These parents then ironically criticize their children for not being as capable or successful as others. Sadly, many parents believe this is necessary for resilience and that enduring hardship will lead to future success. However, negative feedback from parents can cause significant harm, only deepening the child's resentment and creating a gap between them. Loving your children means respecting them, acknowledging their feelings, and providing positive guidance, rather than using them as a vent for your own emotions. In summary, the parent-child relationship is a gift from heaven. How to make this bond strong and comfortable is a question each person must consider and learn. Throughout the years, as parents, we have devoted endless effort and love, hoping for filial piety in our old age. However, filial piety is not inherent, but needs to be cultivated and guided correctly. Avoid unjust criticism and moral coercion of your children. Replacing criticism and undermining with respect and encouragement is a crucial step towards a good parent-child relationship. Support your children's development with understanding and tolerance. Understand their situations and pressures, and offer more compassion and empathy. Establish open communication channels and engage in equal dialogue to resolve conflicts. As parents, let's start changing how we interact with our children now. Instead of complaining and blaming, focus on understanding and supporting them. Only by improving ourselves can we earn our children's respect and filial piety. Remember, the warmth and harmony of a family require the collective effort of every member. Let's begin today to practice these simple yet important behaviors, making our later years more joyful and fulfilling. May all parents enjoy a happy old age surrounded by their children's love, and may all children understand the true meaning of filial piety. Let's work together to create a family environment full of love and understanding. Advice from someone who's been there. If possible, do not personally serve as a caregiver for your parents. As someone who has been through this experience, I want to advise everyone on this matter. If you have the means, avoid personally taking care of elderly parents, especially those who are bedridden or have dementia. Even if you are very filial, it is better not to do so. This is not to suggest that you should be unfilial, but long-term caregiving can become a torment for both the elderly and their children. I am 58 years old and have been retired for 8 years. For 2 of those years, I dedicated myself to caring for my elderly mother-in-law, who has dementia. My mother-in-law is 85 years old and began showing signs of dementia 10 years ago. At that time, although she was occasionally confused, she could still live independently. However, her condition suddenly worsened 6 years ago, and she became completely demented. She would sometimes be silent, other times act erratically, and perform foolish actions. Initially, my husband suggested sending her to a nursing home, but I resisted because she had been kind to me in the past, and we had minimal conflicts. She had also helped raise my children. Now that she was old and demented, I could not bear to send her to a nursing home. Since I was retired and not needed to take care of the children, I had the capacity to care for her myself. We brought her into our home and made it as safe as possible. We arranged the house to prevent accidents, patted the floors with foam, and fixed everything in place. In the beginning, taking care of her did not seem too difficult. It was similar to taking care of young children who need extra patience and guidance. My husband adjusted his work hours to help with caregiving, and my 2 younger sisters-in-law, who lived in the same city, would come over for a day or 2 each month. Overall, it was manageable, though it required constant supervision. However, after about 6 months, my mother-in-law's dementia worsened significantly. I began to feel that I was suffering. Her condition became so severe that she behaved like a mad person. Sometimes she would not speak, or she would refuse to eat or drink. Other times, she would act out, eating tissues, biting clothes, spitting, and soiling herself. I was unable to control her on my own. Every time she had a fit, I felt like the world was collapsing. I was unsure whether to hit her, scold her, or restrain her. Her condition continued to deteriorate, and my younger sisters-in-law became fearful and anxious about being hurt or scratched by her, so they stopped helping and began only providing financial support. At this point, my husband suggested sending her to a nursing home, as continuing this way was truly torturous for us. Even though my sisters-in-law had stopped helping, I stubbornly continued for a few more months until I realized that my mental state was collapsing. I was prone to anger, often blamed myself, and my physical health deteriorated. I lost over 10 pounds. Seeing me in such a state, my husband finally made the tough decision to send my mother-in-law to a nursing home. Later, a doctor friend mentioned that if one's mental and physical state remains unstable for a long time, it could lead to mental illness. Initially, I did not believe this, but after hearing about a neighbor who nearly suffered from depression while caring for her mentally ill mother, I became worried. This neighbor, who is just 2 years older than me, is an only child. Unable to bear sending her mother to a specialized nursing home or trusting a hired caregiver, she left her own family responsibilities to care for her mother. Her husband did not agree or help, so she cared for her mother alone for 3 years. During this time, she had no social interactions, no relatives, and lived apart from her husband. Her mother's condition was worse than my mother-in-law's. She was constantly agitated and disruptive, causing complaints from neighbors. Seeing this, I sympathized with her and tried to help by bringing food and assisting with household chores. However, her situation frightened me. She often expressed a desire to end everything, and her family eventually had to forcefully send her mother to a nursing home while she sought psychological help. After taking medication and spending time with her husband to recover, she gradually returned to normal. Witnessing the neighbor's situation made me fear for my own well-being, if I had continued caring for my demented mother-in-law alone. If I had persisted, I might have lost my sanity or further deteriorated my health. Therefore, after these experiences, I advise everyone that if possible, do not personally serve as a caregiver for your parents. Even if you are very filial, especially with parents who have lost their self-care abilities and cognitive functions, sending them to a nursing home is not a sign of unfiliality. In fact, professional caregivers at nursing homes are more capable and experienced in handling such situations. They have the knowledge and patience to provide better care and are better equipped to deal with emergencies. On the other hand, personal caregiving often leads to worsening mental health and physical conditions for the caregiver. While it is true that we should care for our parents as they age, this duty can be fulfilled by employing alternative methods, such as placing them in a nursing home or hiring professional caregivers. This approach is also a form of filial piety. Therefore, this is not unfilial, but rather a way to ensure the well-being of both the elderly and ourselves. By the time I turned 63, I discovered that whether one has money or not, old age is inevitably difficult. I used to hear that the quality of one's later years is determined by the amount of money one has. Elderly people with money can live comfortably and happily because money can satisfy over 90% of our needs. With money, one can buy what they want, get medical treatment if ill, and hire caregivers if unable to care for themselves. In contrast, elderly people without money are destined to have a hard life. Although it's true that having money or not makes a difference, after caring for my paralyzed mother for 4 years, I deeply understand that regardless of wealth, old age is difficult and unavoidable. Let me share some of my family's story to explain further. My name is Lu Chunsheng, and I am 63 years old. I retired at 55 due to illness. Although retiring early means receiving a smaller pension, I am still quite satisfied with it. My current pension is 5,200 yuan, and my wife's is 4,500 yuan. In 2 more years, our combined pensions will exceed 10,000 yuan. When I first retired, I thought our later years would be very happy and carefree. In my view, those elderly people who suffer in their later years are often those who lack money. However, both my wife and I had ample pensions and savings. Our only son had already started his own family and was very independent and successful. After his marriage, he did not need our financial support or help with childcare. Both of our parents were also in good health and financially stable, so we did not have to bear much burden. My parents were retired workers with pensions even higher than mine, and my wife's only remaining parent, her mother, was cared for by her younger brother. Thus, the first few years of retirement for my wife and me were very enjoyable. We traveled, sang, danced, and socialized with friends. Life was both relaxed and joyful. However, this happy period did not last long. A family crisis disrupted our carefree life. 5 years ago, my 83-year-old mother accidentally fell and became partially paralyzed. She could no longer care for herself. Initially, my wife and I were busy taking care of her, but we later hired a caregiver. My elderly father also helped with her care, so we had some relief. Usually, the caregiver and my father looked after her, and my wife and I would visit once or twice a week, or take over during holidays when the caregiver was on leave. But a year later, my father, who was in better health than my mother, suddenly passed away. He died unexpectedly. He had just eaten lunch with the caregiver and then went for a nap, only to never wake up. After my father's death, my mother's personality changed drastically. Previously, she had no complaints about the caregiver, but once my father was gone, she began criticizing the caregiver, who had taken care of her for over a year. She drove the caregiver away. I thought this was due to her being lonely without my father, so I arranged for acquaintances to care for her. First, I hired a neighbor from my hometown, then my cousin, and later, my mother's niece. Unfortunately, none of them lasted long and were also driven away by my mother. Eventually, we ran out of options and moved back to my parents' home to care for my mother ourselves. To my surprise, my mother was satisfied with us taking over. However, my wife and I faced a lot of difficulties. We could no longer be as free as we were after retirement, going out at will. Our daily life revolved around caring for my mother. Each morning, I had to change her diapers, while my wife washed her face and brushed her teeth. I would then prepare breakfast while my wife fed her. After meals, I would take my mother out in her wheelchair for some fresh air and a walk. In the afternoons, I had to bathe her and turn her in bed, occasionally massaging her back. The most painful part wasn't the physical labor but assisting her with bowel movements. Those who have cared for paralyzed elderly people know that while helping with urination is manageable, bowel movements, especially when constipated, are torturous. We had to use enemas and assist manually. My wife was most fearful of this. She would gag at the smell and lost her appetite. Initially, I could handle it, but over time, assisting with her bowel movements also became distressing. In the past 2 years, things have improved a bit. My mother seemed to understand our hard work and became more cooperative. My wife and I are also aging and unable to handle all the caregiving tasks, so we hired a caregiver to assist during the day, handling bathing, bowel movements, and walks. We took over buying groceries, cooking, and providing evening companionship. From these 4 years of caring for my paralyzed mother, I realized that whether one has money or not, old age is tough. Despite having a good pension and a successful child, the severity of my mother's illness proved that money cannot solve all problems or alleviate all suffering. Although having money allows us to hire caregivers, some elderly people, like my mother, still need personal care. Ultimately, children must take on the caregiving role. Caring for an elderly person involves suffering for both the caregiver and the elderly person. My mother, who has been bedridden for 5 years, cannot do anything she wants. She is confined to bed or a wheelchair, watching TV or sleeping. Eating and drinking are no longer comfortable. She needs everything to be pureed and fed spoon by spoon. She no longer experiences the pleasure of chewing or tasting food and occasionally chokes. To maintain her health, she takes numerous bitter medications before and after meals. But the worst part is the lack of control over her own body, living daily without dignity or autonomy. So, having money doesn't necessarily ensure a comfortable and carefree old age. It might allow for a slightly better quality of life while still healthy, but when one is ill or paralyzed, the pain and suffering remain unavoidable. No amount of money can keep our bodies young and healthy forever. Although the inevitable decline in old age cannot be reversed, we should not panic or be afraid. Regular exercise and maintaining health in youth can delay the onset of old age and reduce illness, allowing us to face later years with fewer problems. Thank you for watching. I hope today's sharing has touched you. For those who haven't subscribed, don't forget to click subscribe so we can accompany you every day. Let's grow together, find happiness, and age gracefully. See you next time.